All right, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're signed in from. Thank you all for joining us. I do see a number of people here and more people joining every moment. My name is Peter. I am with Dash, powered by Eight-Legged Media, and you've joined us for the first in a new series of webinars that we are sponsoring, featuring Cliff Quicksell, who is our guest presenter and will be taking us through the presentation today. For those of you that may not be familiar with GoToWebinar, if you notice the chat function in the box, feel free at any point if you have questions to type those questions into that box. And we have reserved some time at the end of the presentation for Cliff to go ahead and address those questions. We will be following up with people after the webinar if there is something we can't address today. And again, we do appreciate you joining us. Without further ado, I do want to introduce Cliff.
Thank you there, Peter. Appreciate it. And thank you, everyone who is on this call. I am very excited to be a part of this new platform, moving this to more education. Hopefully, you're going to find it very, very valuable. And as Peter said earlier, this is the first of many that we're going to have coming down the pike. And very excited about having you on this call today. So again, as Pete said, if you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat box and we will get to those at the end of the presentation. So this short little webinar, 30 minutes, 35 minutes long, but it's about determining your value. And one of the things that I find as a consultant speaker in this industry is that so many people never take the time to really think about their personal value and what they're worth. And I want to begin this with a little story. And I think this story is very relevant. I heard this once and it really drove the point home for me. And I hope it does for you as well. There is a woman who's having some issues, legal issues. And so she approaches her attorney and she says, "Can you help me out? And I'm really struggling with this problem and I really need some help." So the attorney listens to her, takes in a few details, and then finally gets on a call and makes a call, and he says to her, "Here's your answer." Well, she's elated about the fact that this person was able to help her out, and really she says, "Oh my God, you saved me. And I really appreciate it. Just do me a favor, please send me the bill. Thank you, thank you, thank you." So he sends her the invoice, and much to her dismay, she gets this invoice, and it's for $500. And she's baffled, and she calls him, and she says, "I don't understand. I was in your office not for a long period of time, and you got on the phone call, and it was a 5-minute phone call, and you're charging me $500? And the attorney says, "Yeah, and it took me 20 years to know which phone number to call." Now, does this sound relatable to you in any way, shape, or form as you go through your particular day? Clients call you because they have a problem, they have an issue, and they need help. And so often we give this brilliant, amazing advice, this time that we put in, the tenure that we put in, we wind up giving it away. It's like sometimes when I talk with people, they go, "Oh yeah, I do artwork and I just give it to the customer as a customer service." But what about your time? What is that worth? If you're filing catalogs at your office or you're doing mundane work, what is it costing you? I was just like you. I was like most people, and there was a real reckoning that I came up with, and because when I was I felt like I was relinquishing my control to the customer all the time. And if it was just about product, then it was just about price. And then I look at, what the vendors are, quote unquote, suggesting that I charge for the item, which is fine. But again, I want everybody on this call to realize it's nothing more than that, than a suggestion. It's just a suggestion. And oftentimes we relinquish our rights, or I like to say we hand over the steering wheel to a customer and let them drive our bus, that drive our business. And that shouldn't be the way it is. I was working with one of my clients just yesterday, and I felt bad. I mean, she has this massive customer that always paid within terms. Now all of a sudden they're going to this big RFP. They've changed the terms now where, yeah, we're going to pay you in 90 days. We're not going to pay you in, net 30 like we normally did. And now everything is relegated to cheap price. We pay when we choose to pay, and you either take it or leave it. And that's sad because we're losing control. And look, I'll be the first one to tell you, it's not easy making a marketable change in your business, in the marketable way that you look at things. But hopefully through this process, you'll see that, you're much more and you're much better than I think that you give yourself credit in many cases. So ponder this for a minute. If a client says to you, I just want your creative mind, what would you charge me for an hour of your time? And think about that. And I've gotten people at different types of webinars that I've done, and when I've done face-to-face presentations, it's amazing to me that some people can't give me a concrete answer. What would you charge me for just an hour of your time? Whatever your specialty is, if it's company stores, and we're going to get into that, if it's creative, if it's packaging, and I wanted your expertise, because I have somebody else that can do it cheap, what would you charge me for your time? Most people don't ever think about that. And I will tell you right now that you're worth far more than you give yourself credit, and that you should be thinking about this. Why is it that agencies do it all the time? They charge for their time. They have an hourly rate. Why can't we? Yeah, because we relegate ourselves to making our money on the stuff that we sell and not the knowledge base that we bring to the table. And I want you to think deep about this, because this is important. Understanding your value is really critical. So what I said to you a moment ago, we are relegated to what others say that we're worth. And if people don't see your value, it's like right now, what you're doing. Everything that you do, you go to a show, the ASI show, PPAI show, whatever the case may be. You sit down and you get educated. You do this education that we're doing right now. You're doing research. You're working with other clients. You have network groups that you're involved with. And every single solitary time you learn something, that should increase your value. And at some level, that should translate back to the customer. And think about that. If you had a job, and the longer you're in the business, you get a raise. Are you getting a raise every year with all the stuff that you're learning, all the information that you have, all the technical advice that you could give to a customer that could, in the case that I told you about that story earlier, that could save your customer a problem, like maybe it's the product safety that PPAI puts out. Maybe you could save a customer's hide in many occasions because they may not know that certain things are required by law, but you do. Is that valuable? Could that potentially have saved the customers in a financial way? The reality is there's value in what we do. And we have to understand that that value is important, and it should translate back at some level to how you get compensated and how you get paid. Not just about the product, not just about sales. It is all about how do we drive the maximum amount of profit to our business. For those of you who heard me speak before, you know I'm a big proponent of this quote. I love it. Sales feed egos, profits feed families. What are we doing to drive, if all of a sudden everybody is controlled, suppliers are in control of what they tell you should be selling their product for. The clients are now telling you, oh, this is the way I'm going to pay, and this is what I'm willing to pay for it. How do you get out from underneath of that? How do you get out from underneath of that? You need to start thinking again about, what does it look like? The internet is a positive thing, but it also can prove very, very detrimental in many levels. I mean, think about this. Think about this for a moment. I did a Google search, and it was pretty interesting, on promotional products and the discount codes. And there was hundreds of these things that popped up. This was an article that was printed in the fall winter. I forget which magazine it was, but in 2003. Since 2003, this is magnified at such a high level, it's ridiculous. But they sit here and they explain what the discount codes are. So think about right now the type of clients that you're working with. And if you're an old guy like me, I'm 63 years old. And I know what the buyers look like now. I'm dealing with hundreds of people on a consultative level right now, and they're telling me, and I see it because I have one-on-one calls with these folks sometimes, and they're younger, they're smarter, they're more attentive. They know the internet. They're savvy. So all of a sudden they go online and what is it? These discount codes? What does that mean? And then you get something like this guy down in Florida back in 2011 decides that he's going to put, and I just did a Google search, PPAI ASI pricing codes, and this 13 posts came up from this. But now if you did it again, you'd be amazed. Look what this person's done. They've now explained exactly what this means. This was supposed to be at some level your I don't know what the word I'm trying to look for. It was like your secret code that you knew what you were making. Like I said to you before, what the suppliers suggest you sell their product at is merely that. It's a suggestion. And I tell you this because oftentimes we feel like we have to be relegated to this, but if you're adding value at every level, and we're going to talk about this in more detail in some upcoming webinars that we're doing. But if you think about that, you don't have to be relegated to charging what the supplier tells you need to charge. And think about this. If the buyers now from 20 to 35 are 60% more likely to shop on the web, now all of a sudden if they can find out what that means, they can dictate, right? What they can charge and what you can't charge, or why would you charge me so much for stuff? They don't know the detail like the lawyer, 20 years of experience. Your experience translates to the same way. They don't know the different, how many times you've been to a trade show, the mistakes that you made, the things that you've done to help other customers, all of the things that you have potentially in place. I would contend right now that the vast majority of you on this call at this moment, your customers have no idea all of the things that you can do for them. Think about that. Because I tell you, I see this every single day when I work, and I hear this all the time. I was working with, give you an example, I was working with someone recently, and the person said, I sent them something on some kitting and packaging. And the woman's like, oh my God, I had no idea that you did this kind of thing. And I'm saying, yeah, you can't expect people just to figure this stuff out. You have to put it in their face. They have to see it. You have to demonstrate it. I often use the example, I think, and I think that you'll appreciate this, well, you know, whether male or female, whatever your relationship is, if I tell my wife, you know, honey, I love you. I love you, I love you, I love you. And I'm just saying it all the time, but I don't demonstrate that by rubbing her back or giving her a hug or giving her a kiss goodnight or holding her hand when we're walking through the park or something. That demonstration really validates the fact that I do love you. Similar, a little bit different, but similar principle here. If I tell people that you need to be creative and innovative and do all this, I have to demonstrate that. If I'm going to show them that I can do creative packaging, things like that, why in the world would I send something to someone in a cheap box that I could buy off of Uline online? Why wouldn't I do something custom? I want to be able to demonstrate that because people are so busy, they're not going to figure this out. They're not going to figure out what it is that you do. So I encourage you, and we're going to talk about this a couple times through this short webinar, but again, I encourage you to go back and start thinking about all the things that you do. And how do you get that out there to your customers so that they know? See, the issue with a lot of salespeople, and I'm one, so I can make this claim, most salespeople expect immediate gratification. I sent them something on packaging, and they didn't respond. Okay, so what? Maybe they're not responding right this second. Maybe you have to reiterate it in a different way. Maybe you send them an article or a white paper on the value of packaging. Maybe you send them an example of something. Maybe you show them something that you find online. And I use that example for packaging is because right now during this COVID, kitting and packaging and fulfillment and that creativity of, keeping people engaged while at home is huge. I've seen many of you probably are experiencing the same thing right now, that you've been able to pivot and do things a little bit differently. And that just goes to show you how incredible the human spirit is. When you want to eat and you need to eat, boy, you can think of things immediately on how to change the direction of your business, which helps other people, which in turn helps you. So again, you have to think about this. And I encourage you to do so because it is very, very important. I want to share with you just a brief formula. Now, you can plug in your numbers, but when I start talking about how few people that I've found that have actually sat down and thought about, okay, what is it about what I do and, what am I worth an hour and how does all that work? A buddy of mine, a former CEO of AIA, his name is Dan Carlson. I worked for Dan for quite a few years. And I love this quote. He says, the promotional product industry is the only job where you only have to work half days and you get to pick which 12 hours you want to work. Now, a lot of you may giggle about that and laugh, but it's true. I would bet right now, all of the folks that are on this call are not working 40-hour weeks. You're not working 40-hour weeks. I know this because, as I said, I work with folks all the time, and I hear people tell me, I had to work Saturday and Sunday this week. I was up till midnight putting in orders. I was doing this. I was doing this to catch up. I was doing quotes till late at night after I put my kids to bed. I hear it all the time. But you know what? We don't take into consideration what all that means. So here's a little formula. It's raw, albeit, but just think about it. And you can plug in the numbers and see it. Now, I did this for one of my customers some time ago, and he was shocked. He said, why would I continue to do this? Now, I'm not encouraging you not to continue doing it because you can make shifts and you can pivot and make changes to make this all better. But just I want you to see this real quick. So let's figure that you work 6 days a week and it's a 12-hour day and you take 2 weeks of vacation a year. Over a given year, that's 6 times 12 times 50 weeks. That's 3,744 hours annually that you work. And let's just humor me for a minute and just look at this. You sold $200,000 this year at a 32% gross profit, which leaves you profit of $64,000. Now, the minimal cost to run a business, this could be high for some, but generally, I remember Glenn Holt, a buddy of mine who's no longer with us, but he said that on average, the minimum break-even number for someone running a business, insurance, gas, tax, all that, if you have an office, it's even higher, but you're looking at about 17% to break even. So if you take that away from the 64,000, that leaves you with what? 53,000 and some change. If you divide that 53,120 by the number of hours, that means that you've made $14.19 an hour. For some people, that might be great. But you know what? Like I said, I think that if you can work smarter, higher or average order sizes, get paid for your creativity and innovation, that number can be exponential. But think about this for a minute. What if you only sold 100,000? You made $7.10 an hour. What if you only sold 50,000? You made $3.55 an hour. So when you start looking at this, you can sit there and say, look, I'm not taking anything away from somebody that wants to work 50 hours a week. I mean, make $50,000 a year in sales. That's fine. I'm not dogging anybody for that. It's just that there's a way for us to look at this with a different viewpoint, so that we can elevate our game. I think if you can start from a baseline and you understand your personal value, the next time that person calls you up and says, hey, I know this isn't a big order. I need you to sharpen your pencil right now, but I got lots of business coming down the road. And we've all heard that. Excuse me. And most of the time, I've never seen that truck pull up at the front of my door. But the bottom line is, if you know it's going to take you time and you have a baseline for what your hourly, what you're worth an hour, it changes the dynamics. And I'm going to share with you a story here pretty quickly. So raising the bar and showing value. I think that you need to look at what it is that you do different. Every one of you on this call, I promise you, if we sat and talked for an hour, we would uncover some things that are pretty unique and remarkable to you. You may have a background, for instance, in HR. You may have a background in, let's say, fishing. I know that sounds kind of weird, but these all lend themselves to having an expertise in a particular vertical market. You may have an expertise in, like, I have a background in packaging. So I use that, I leverage that in a major way when I would go out and sell to my customers, because I knew that inside and out. And I knew it better than most people knew it. So it was an advantage to me. When I took the product safety courses through PPAI and I get recertified every 2 years, I look at that as a definite differentiator when I'm out selling in the marketplace. Because at the end of the day, it's the buyer's job to level the playing field. If I can go in and I can say if a buyer can say, I want a white C-handled coffee mug, and I ask every single one of you that are on the call for that, everybody can find that, everybody can do it. Then if I can say, well, okay, well, this guy over here is this price, and this guy's over here at this price, can you help, can you knock off some money? Happens all the time. And unfortunately, most of the time, people acquiesce to that. My dad, years ago, God rest his soul, my dad was in a meeting and he called me in because I worked at the same place he did at the time. And he was in charge of buying printing. And this very savvy salesperson walks in the door, and my dad asks him all the particulars about the job, et cetera. And the guy goes down to give my dad the price. My dad looked like he was having apoplexy. And I'm looking at him, and he goes, that price is just too high. And the salesperson, instead of querying my father, said, hang on a second. And he goes back and he looks like he's writing down some numbers. And guess what? He says, I can give you 20% more off of that. Now, maybe he had it stacked. I don't know. But when the guy walked out, my dad said, I'll think about it. He says, when I looked at it, I said, what was all that? That you were acting crazy when he gave you the price. He goes, I wanted to see what he would do. And he did. And he goes, and the crazy thing is his first price was 20% cheaper than any price that I've gotten thus far. And now I've got it for 20% more or less. He goes, that's my job, is to get it for the cheapest price. Now, I don't agree with that, but boy, did I learn a lesson that day. I learned the lesson that I'm not going to let people do that to me again. I have value. I know what I need to do to run my business, to feed my family, to go on vacation. I know what I have to do. I know the profit that I have to make. Each of you should know the same thing and be comfortable at some level walking away if you have to walk away. It's okay. Years ago, a woman came to my office when I had a screen printing and embroidery shop along with my promotional products company. I would call it more of a marketing agency. And this woman calls me and she comes in and she goes, I'm in desperate need of somebody that can help me print this item. I go, what is it? She goes, it's a tennis shoe. And I went, okay. She goes, I said, how many do you need done? She says, one. I said, okay, when do you need it? She says, I need it tomorrow. I said, okay. I knew where to get it done. And I knew the person that could do it for me. But I did know that it was going to take me about 10 hours of my time to make sure that I had the art right, to get the shoe over to the person that was going to do it, to be able to make sure that we did test prints on some similar thing. I would have to go out and get some type of substrate so we could make sure that we could do this properly on a pad printer. I just wanted to make sure, because I knew that it had to be spot on. So when I did the calculation, I said, well, it's going to cost $1,750 to have that done for you by tomorrow. The woman, I thought she was going to come out of her sneakers. She goes, that is wrong. That is rude. I can't believe you would do that. And after she inflicted so much verbal abuse on me about how I was taking advantage of her, I said, ma'am, you don't have to use me. You can go anywhere and get this done. She goes, I've been everywhere. You're the only one that can do it. There you go. Now, I don't think that I'm taking advantage of somebody if I've got to take my time and my effort and my expertise to get something done for someone. So if you have the ability to do that, as long as you're not gouging somebody, I look at it this way. If somebody's roof blew off in a hurricane, and yesterday I could buy plywood for $10 a sheet, now I'm charging $110 a sheet, that's gouging. But if somebody comes to me and needs a project done, and I know what it's going to take to get it done, and I can get it done, then guess what? This is my value. This is what I charge an hour. This is what I know it's going to take 10 hours of my time, because guess what? If I didn't do that, I would be devoting that same time, that precious time. And that's all we all have in common is those 24 hours. I have to divvy that up. And so that when I'm making the maximum amount of money that I can in that short period of time that I'm putting into my company. Now, I just want to say, for clarity's sake, I've never sold $1 million in sales. My best year was probably 960,000, but my margins were at between 58 and 61%, because I realized that I had to deliver as much value as possible in the time frame that I had to. And I guess what? People appreciated that. Heck, I even had people on retainer for creative, and you can do the same thing. I want to tell you, you also have to believe in your value. I'm going to tell you a real short story. I love this story. It's pretty cool. There's a young Jamaican boy sitting on the beach, and he's making baskets out of palm leaves. And they're beautiful. They're just absolutely beautiful. The guy walks up to the young boy, and he says to him, hey, my friend, how much are those baskets? And the young boy says, $20. And the guy says, you got to be kidding me, $20 for a basket made out of palm leaves? And he just keeps going on and on and on. And finally, the young boy looks at him, and he hands him a whole stack of palm leaves. He says, sir, you can have these for free. The bottom line is, the kid has an expertise. He knows what he's doing. He sees and appreciates the value. Don't just cave into people when they're saying, oh, it seems like an awful lot. Do your homework and stick by the things that you're doing. There's a way that you can also look at this. How do you bring a different value set when you're talking to your customers? I put this small grid together, and I think it makes a lot of sense. If you take and have a balanced approach to being able to do things both solutions driven and product driven, you'll find that from a product driven standpoint, what you have is that it's easy, it's short term, it's frustrating, it's time consuming, and guess what? Everybody's in the game. Everybody. But the thing is, when you start looking at doing things that are innovative and creative and more solutions driven, it's a little bit more difficult. It requires work. It requires creativity and strategy and strategic thinking rather, but it's more results oriented versus price oriented. It's all about how do I measure the return on objective and return on investment, as opposed to just branding and cost per impression. So that there is a balance. But what I find, or what I found, not only through myself, but other people that I work with, is that the people that are really focused on driving solutions as opposed to just driving product sales, they have 40 to 70% gross profit margins. And they are among what I would call the 3%ers in the industry that utilize the tools that we have, but they utilize them in a different way. It does require a lot of work, but I will tell you that the value set that comes from that is pretty astounding. So this is the other ways that I think that we talked about this earlier about showing additional value. So I would encourage you to look at, what is your specialty? Valuing what I call the invaluable in a lot of people's mind. How do you become remarkable? And I believe that you do it through, and this is not the only thing, but when you're doing your questioning and your consultation, for your consultation, can you not get paid for that? I talked to you about this a moment ago, about how I had clients on retainer, that we would work off a retainer money. You know, if they had a $10,000 retainer, they would call me up and they need some consulting. We pull it off of the retainer. Our deliverables would be additional. What about upselling? Do you know about upselling and added value? Like when somebody buys we kind of tap into creative here as well, about packaging as well, but I would encourage you, anytime someone buys any product from you, ask them the question, how would you like that packaged? It'll stimulate a conversation, and be ready to have an answer. But being able to upsell, not only packaging, creative services, kitting and fulfillment, all those variables make a huge difference. So I would encourage you to take that deep dive look at what it is that you do and what makes you unique and different. And it goes beyond, folks, it goes beyond just saying that I have great customer service. Everybody should have that. But it's these other tools that you learn about, that you can decide you want to learn about and become more of an expertise. If it comes to apparel, if it comes to decorating apparel, how do we package that? All those things are value added to the customer, but they're not value added unless the customer knows it and that you can actually talk about it. There's other things that we could talk about print management. How do we create company stores for customers? Company stores that can either be for fundraising. Now that people are not going to work, how do we create engagement packages for people that are working from home and still need to be engaged in that working environment? Maybe you have a background in awards and recognition. There's hundreds of things that we could be doing. One of the things that I would encourage you to look at too is vertical expertise. Now, I preach this a lot, and we will certainly be doing a seminar on vertical markets and understanding how those work. But I would encourage you to take a look at your database and segment it out by vertical market and say, okay, where do I have my strengths? You may have I had a huge background, for instance, in the hospitality industry. And that while that industry is not doing well right now, there are some that are thriving. Construction is thriving. Banking and finance is thriving right now. Medical is thriving right now. Are you really working those markets? If you have those accounts, are you really deeply entrenched in those accounts? Do they know all the things that you can do? Are you reaching out beyond that? Are you getting deeper, more ingrained in those particular accounts you do have? And are you looking for more prospects within that same vertical market so that you can share that expertise that you have and you are that valuable resource? I really would encourage you to take that deep dive and take a hard look at what we're talking about. Jim Rohn's one of my favorite guys. I love listening to him, reading his speeches and listening to some of the encouraging quotes he has. And I love this quote he talks about taking courage. It says, you need courage to be creative, because most people are afraid to fail, actually. You need courage to see things differently, courage to go against the crowd, courage to take a different approach, courage to stand alone. If you have to, courage to choose activity over inactivity. In other words, doing something versus doing nothing. It takes courage to do that. It's not easy. It's a challenge. But guess what? As we roll into 2021 and we get rid of this yoke of 2020 that's been on our neck for over almost a year now, there's opportunity. You know, how do we future-proof our business, and what are the steps that we might take? Noting this, technology is not stopping, folks. Clients and prospects, as we talked about earlier, are getting younger. So you need to start thinking both micro and macro. Appreciate and articulate your value, and always look for ways to reinvent yourself. Always look for ways to reinvent yourself. It's really important. So I would encourage you, as we wrap this up, take a deep dive. Look at your background. Look at what you do, what makes you unique, and do a SWOT analysis of yourself. And that is What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are the opportunities? And what are the threats that stand in your way? And when you can identify those things, you can then start to make a move. Look at what, do the exercise about how much money that you made last year and see what that looks like. Develop a plan of action. This is one of the things that most people fail to do, is create a plan. Write it down. Stick to the plan. Get paid for what you know, not just for what you sell. That's a byproduct. Get paid for what you know. If that's first and foremost, the other stuff, in my opinion, is like gravy, right? It's gravy. Your knowledge and skill has value. But if you don't recognize that and you don't articulate that in some way to your customer, they're never going to know it or appreciate it. Also, you need to take more risks. Be willing to fail. I know that's hard. It goes back to what Jim Rohn said about having the courage. Be willing to fail, but also be excited about winning. Because I can tell you, I probably failed more times than anybody in this call. I nearly went bankrupt 5 times. I know what it's like to fail. I know it's not pleasant. But I do know this, that if I'm not willing to take a chance and not willing to fail, I'll never succeed at anything. I'll become mediocre, and that mediocrity will just turn into complacency. And after a while, it's not a good thing. So I would encourage you to think about what we talked about today. Understand your value. Really take a hard look at that. And how can you start making a difference, not only, but making a difference in your clients' lives, which ultimately will be a reflection on you. Stand strong about your value and what you're worth. Have that dollar figure in your mind. How about if I tell you this as we wrap this up? Every one of you on this call is worth at minimum $100 an hour for your creativity and time. Is that what you're making a year? You could easily do that, but you just have to have a different mindset and a different mind shift. I want to thank everybody that was on this call today. It's really important. And I'm looking forward to doing these. I think we're looking at doing these almost every 2 weeks. They're going to be, like I said, short 30-minute, 35-minute webinars, but I hope it's something that will really stick with you and make you think the next time you're getting ready to take that order or quote that customer, take and pause for a minute and see if you can just sell them a little bit on some different value points that maybe you haven't shared with them before. In your marketing efforts, make sure people know, your clients and prospects know all the things that you can actually do for them. It'll be a game changer for you for sure. Lastly, I want to thank today's webinar sponsor, Dash. It's a company powered by 8-Legged Media. It's a great company, and I'm just really looking forward to what we're going to be doing moving forward together. This has been great. I want to thank you, and you can contact me easily at my phone number there at 717-0615 or my email addresses. And please, if you're interested, sign up for I do a Tuesday mornings, I do a blog called 30 Seconds to Greatness, and we're getting ready to launch, I'm getting ready to launch in a couple of months here a podcast called 30 Seconds to Greatness Podcast, and it's going to be all about small business entrepreneurship and how to grow. So I want to say once again, thank you. Pete, I know you're out there, buddy. I don't know if there's any questions. If there are, that's great. If not, we can wrap this up. Do you have anything for me?
We do. First and foremost, thank you, Cliff. You've received a ton of love and appreciation from a number of people, and thanking you for the content today. We do have a great question, which appears to be about a 2 or 3 in 1. And one of the biggest issues that this person is facing is they will quote, they'll get an order, the order gets approved, including the creative charge, and then the order details and artwork continue to change, which will end up taking away from the profits. So how do we charge for what we're worth after the pricing has been approved? And do we need to charge for additional consulting at that point? How do you tell a client what your value is worth from the get-go? And how do you deal with determining your value when you're in a fluid situation and those things might be changing from day to day?
Wow, that's a whole seminar, but that's great. That's a great question. Let's see if I can sum that up pretty quick. Yeah, it's frustrating for anybody and everybody. You have to be very clear on the front end when you're quoting that, especially if it's creative. You know, there's a whole webinar that we will be doing on doing a creative brief. And so part of the brief or the information that you let them, you share with them on the front end is exactly what they're getting, what they're paying for. You get, here's the creative. Once it's approved, any changes to this are going to be billed out at such and such an hourly charge. So it's very good to do that. You can't, it's difficult to do that after the fact. So I have a creative brief that I have put together that I used all the time, and that really did help. So what it did is it basically put the client and I on the same level playing field, understanding what the expectations were for everyone. Any changes or alterations to that, the client had signed off on that, and they realized that those changes quit. Now, it's certainly up to you to be able to sit there and say, you know what, if it's going to take me another 2 hours to do this, you know, I think that I can work it out. We can probably just bill you an extra hour, and that's it. I mean, you have control there. That's the whole idea. So I get it. It's very, very difficult when you do that. Obviously, I don't think you can do it on the back end because it looks a lot like a bait and switch. So I think when we start doing this other webinar that I'm going to talk about, that'll really tighten all that up in a meaningful way. I hope that answered the question, Pete.
I hope so too. We do have one other one. Where can we find the formula for evaluating our worth?
Where do you find what do you mean, the one? I don't know if they were talking about the one that I actually did in the webinar, but that's a good thing. I could probably put something together like that. Why don't we do that, Pete? You and I can talk about that. I'll put together a formula, and then everybody that was on this call, we'll make sure we get that out. If they can just give us a week or two to do that, I'll make a note to put that together.
That sounds great. That's everything from my end, all the questions that I've received. And Cliff, thank you again for doing this. We look forward to hearing again in the next 2 weeks.
All right, and I appreciate it. Thanks again for everybody on the call. Have a great rest of the year and a super holiday, and can't wait to talk to you in 2 weeks.
All right, everyone, take care. Have a great day.
Bye.